Good afternoon. The April 5th meeting, the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust will be in order. The first item is approval of the minutes of the March 15th meeting. Have a motion?
Move the item.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Corrections, additions, comments? Hearing none, voting please. Minutes are approved. Next item is a consent docket.
Move the consent docket subject to individual consideration.
Second.
Are there items to be considered separately?
Mr. Chairman, I think it's worth noting the engineering contracts, other engineering contracts that are on. This is a significant day, I think, to begin the engineering for the Atoka pipeline. There's several contracts, all with local engineers, broken up in sections of the pipeline, and I think this is a significant event.
All right. Good. Whole series of contracts on there about that.
Yes.
Six of them.
We have two more to come.
Well, it's good to see it moving forward. I saw water coming into the lake this week. It made my heart happy, so it's good to see that happening. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the consent docket. Are there further comments? Hearing none, voting please. Consent docket's approved. Next item is the concurrence docket, I think. Yes, one item.
Move the item.
Second.
Comments on the concurrence docket? Hearing none, voting please. Concurrence docket's approved. Next item, items for individual consideration. It's a presentation by Public Financial Management concerning the 2016 commercial paper.
Mr. Chairman, Dennis Whaley from PFM is here to describe the information in the report.
Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Whaley with Public Financial Management. We're the financial advisor to AQUIT. In front of you, you have a presentation that gives you a little update about the outstanding commercial paper program and also talks about some changes that we're going to make to the commercial paper program, of course, with your approval. Going to page 2, one thing to look at is that on November 23rd of 2015, Moody's upgraded AQUIT to AAA. So the water utility is now rated AAA by Moody's and AAA by S&P, which is pretty lofty territory for water utilities, and you should be very proud of that. They talked about the stable, diverse customer base, the strong cash position, your favorable debt service coverage, your extensive capital planning beyond 10 years, and also prudent management, which speaks very highly of the trustees and the staff at AQUIT. Page 3 looks at rates. You'll notice the rates remain very, very low. We've seen a slight uptick lately, but still rates remain very low, especially in the money market. Page 4, a new chart which I like, and this goes from 1 year to 29 years, and it looks at a 10-year historical range for rates in each year. And you notice the spread over time. And then at the bottom is an orange line, which is current rates in the municipal market, and you'll see that rates remain very, very low. Page 5 looks at the commercial paper that's currently outstanding. One thing to note is you'll see on the last two rolls on March 22nd and March 29th that rates have moved higher. There's 3 reasons for that. One is the Fed, there was talk that they may raise short-term rates. Janet Yellen spoke a week or 2 ago and kind of allayed those fears. 2, April 15 is tax day, so everybody needs to raise a little liquidity to pay their taxes. And 3rd, and most importantly, is we have the coming of money market reform, which will happen in October of 16, and that is where money market funds that don't consist totally of U.S. governments will come off of the $1 fixed value and go to a floating net asset value. So any money market fund you have that doesn't have just treasuries and agencies will now go to a floating NAV. Shouldn't float much, but it'll float a little bit. And there's a lot of volatility in the market as some funds close, people move their money around, supply, demand, In talking to our CP dealer, we think this will all kind of settle out in the July timeframe. I don't expect rates to go back to single digits, which you've seen, but I do expect the market to settle down and your rates to come back down. So look at your money market fund and see what might be in front of you come October. Page 6, compliance. We're in compliance with all three of our benchmarks. We have $113,500,000 left on our $300 million authorization. We are within our $150 million letter of credit limit. We have $107 million we can left to borrow. And then under our procurement authorization, we have $67 million that we could still use for future contracts. Page 7 just gives you a detail of the projects that have been funded under the CP program. And then page 8, which you've seen before, is a quick summary of why CP is very advantageous to Aquit. Rates may remain very low. You do not have a coverage or reserve fund requirement, and it mitigates arbitrage rebate rules because you borrow money as you need it. About a month ago, you received a report called Fiscal Year 16 to 25 10-Year Finance Strategy. Talks about the CIP growing over the next 5 years because of the pipeline project, which I'll just discussed. And in order to keep up with the needs of that project and other Aquit CIP projects, it will be necessary to increase the credit facility size. So the last two bullets, we did some work to try to optimize when we should do these increases in the commercial paper capacity. Talk a little bit about that on the next page. So what we wanted to do was figure out a way to increase capacity over time and also do the takeouts into long-term debt, but not coming back to you all the time with bond sales and increases in capacity. So if we can move the commercial paper program capacity to 275 in August of this year, 275 million. And then our expectation, we would need to raise it again to 375 million in 2018. We should be able to get through this period of larger CIP spending while only doing one CP takeout a year. And the reason you want to optimize your changes in your credit facility and also the number of times you go to market, it just costs money to do both things. You have rating agencies, bond counsel, you have other fees and things that consume your time. So if we can get that down to a reasonable number, I think it's in Aquit's best interest. So page 11 is the one thing you need to know. So there would be a transition. You've always had a direct pay letter of credit on your CP program. We're transitioning to what's called a standby bond purchase agreement, also known as SBPA, or a liquidity facility. The difference in the two is in a direct pay letter of credit, the credit of the bank is what's standing behind the CP. In a liquidity facility, or SBPA, the investors are looking at the credit of Aquit. Now, you're rated AAA, so it's about as good as it gets. So we don't anticipate any bump in your borrowing rates or problems going to market with this. A lot of issuers are transitioning to SBPAs. One of the reasons is new bank capital requirements. When they have a direct pay letter of credit, the amount of money they have to set aside for that, and it's not quite as onerous, but it's much less onerous on them when they do a liquidity facility. So we talked to the bank, and the existing facility costs you 35 basis points. A new direct pay facility would cost you 70 basis points or higher, which is more than double. Going to a liquidity facility, we're looking at 38 basis points, which is just 3 basis points higher than what you're currently paying. So I think the liquidity facility will work very well for you. The requirements, the default requirements in all of the documents are almost exactly the same as if you did a direct pay, so I think this will be in your best interest. Page 12, as we did the financial forecast and worked through all of these numbers, we kept in mind and made sure we maintained the financial metrics that Aquit has always adhered to: 2 times coverage, 1.7 times coverage when you include McGee Creek, 90 days cash, 100% pay-go depreciation, fixed charge coverage of 1 times, and rate smoothing. Rate smoothing is something that we started 5 or 6 years ago in anticipation of the pipeline project, and I think it has worked very well for you by slowly increasing, doing rate adjustments over time, and as we go through this period of high CIP, we won't have any rate spikes going forward and can move through this without, hopefully, big shocks to consumers. Last page just shows your current debt outstanding, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
I hope I can continue to say I'm new to the board, and so that's the reason for the question. But on a percentage basis, what's our long-term debt compared to our short-term debt? And it sounds like we're trying to expand our short-term debt as a percentage of total debt.
You will be expanding your short-term debt as a percentage of total debt. You're going to go from a CP program, which is $150 million, to $275. And what it's going to allow you to do is borrow as needed, and when you reach a certain capacity, then take those bonds out long. And the reason this works in your best interest is if we went out long today and borrowed $200 million, you'll borrow it at 4% interest versus borrowing it as you need it at 50 basis points and having all that negative arbitrage pile up until you can spend off that $200 million. But yes, you are increasing your percentage. Lockwood has $400 million outstanding right now, so you're at 150 to 400 and you're going to 275.
So at some point in time in the life of this project, when we feel that it's close to completion, we'll see a shift.
Great question. Yes, part of our analysis going forward with the model was 275 now, 375 in 18, and our model shows in 2021 that we've come back to the $150 million CP program. Yes.
With a larger percentage at that point in time on your long-term debt.
That's correct. That's correct.
So what did your model show as far as interest rates?
We were using long-term rates of 5%, I believe, and short-term rates in the 1.5% range. We're trying to be conservative. We're looking so far out in the future.
Right. So you're thinking in 2021 that'll be the long-term and short-term rates for your model?
And we ran that over this 5-year period, yes. So hopefully we're being very conservative.
Well, I hope you're accurate.
Is there something that a person would look at and know that if that happened, that we'd have a problem? I mean, is there an economic indicator that would say, you know, you can't borrow money without some risk? I mean, at least I've never figured out how to do it, if there was a way to do it. But I'm not quite sure what the risk is here. I'm not sure how I would know if I woke up in the morning and what would I read in the newspaper that said we've got a problem?
Well, I'm going to hope you don't read anything in
No, I
the
understand.
newspaper. When we do our modeling, we model per the financial policies, and we model with your policies being keeping you at AAA. Right. So when I'm looking forward, as we're looking at bond sales and taking out commercial paper, we're looking at maintaining your cash position and your coverage. Now, one thing we do, Marcia, Brett, Billy, and the rest of staff, we get together and look at this model, where we headed, what have actual revenues been over the last year, what do we see changing to make sure that we're still on the path. Because you have to look at it every once in a while, and as we move through this period, I think we'll look at it even more often, just to make sure everything is in good shape.
Pete, I think a simple answer to this, much simpler than what they work on, is if for some reason we saw an escalation, a quick, severe escalation in long-term rates, and we were stuck. You know, we could have locked into long-term rates, say at 3 or 4%. Due to something going on in the economy now, we're faced with 7 to 8%, and we lost that opportunity to to lock in long-term rates. That's probably, from a very simplistic approach, the biggest risk we're at.
But our ability to borrow the money is probably guaranteed by the AAA bond rating, is that correct?
I'm sorry, I
I
didn't.
mean, if that happened and we had to go borrow it, it wouldn't be that we couldn't borrow it, it would be, we'd be paying at a higher rate.
Right, it's not that you
Our-
couldn't borrow it, you just
Our
paid that
financial
higher.
situation would dictate that we've got the ability to borrow it. It's just the market's going to dictate how much it's going to cost.
That's correct.
And you could move it forward if the rates started moving, I assume.
Sure.
Right.
Sure, we can always accelerate.
That helps. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So, and the second part of the agenda.
Is a resolution, right? So the second part of 5A is a resolution relating to the 2016 commercial paper issue. Do we have a motion on that?
Move approval.
Motion and a second to approve. Any further questions or comments? Resolution is approved. Items from trustees. Comments? Hearing none. General managers' reports.
Mr. Chairman and trustees, we have a couple of general manager reports of interest today. First, I want to visit with you briefly about 7A, the disposal of wastewater treatment biosolids. We've had some citizen complaints through the spring about odors from biosolids. The action that I've taken is to ask CDM Smith, who's been our contractor assisting us with transition of the wastewater operations contract, which is responsible for the biosolids program, to the new vendor. I've asked CDM Smith to prepare for us a review based on standards set by the National Biosolids Partnership. National Biosolids Partnership is a clearinghouse organization comprised of representatives from the Water Environment Federation, the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, and the US EPA. What I intend to do is have CDM Smith review practices for best available practices and conformance to contemporary standards for those practices. I believe that we have a program that does that. I want to look for any possible ways to improve the existing program. I've provided some information about the long-term future of biosolids disposal. And when we completed the 2009 wastewater master plan, we developed options. With the potential to move to those options, should land disposal of biosolids become impossible. We think that from a regulatory standpoint, we think that we still have options going forward that can make this most cost-effective program, continue to make that feasible and palatable for our community. We have some work to do with CDM to get started on that path.
Marcia, well, I'd like to wait until the end of your report to ask you this question.
I'm ready.
Okay. As it kind of relates to the use of the three major lakes that we have, you know, as far as commercial development, anybody that ever has an interest in looking at putting in any type of commercial interest would first approach us. Is that the process that it would go through, Jim or Marcia?
Yes. Yes, either one of us. And we don't discount. We do talk to people about what we consider the feasibility based on past policy advice, but we do bring those requests forward for your consideration.
Now, do we have a plan to kind of protect, for example, like Draper, which is in more of a rural, undeveloped area, to protect that and not allow development to occur there and try to encourage the development more along Hefner and Overholser, or has that not been decided?
No, there are really three different facilities.
Yeah.
Overholser has very little land around it, and so there's not a lot of development potential at Lake Overholser.
Okay.
Hefner is has a very engaged recreational user base. And so, you agree with that, Mr. Ryan? And so, you know, we did the East Wharf development out there, which has been well, I don't know if you like it or not, but it's certainly been able to allow the trust to have some money to do, go into our non-rate base and do some recreational things that are developed off that. And most people think that that's been okay out there. Other development opportunities at Lake Hefner have been very, very controversial. Marsh has looked at doing some things out there recently on the south side, and the neighbors get very, very engaged very, very quickly out there. But there's a strong market, and Hefner's unique. There's a vacant piece of property that the trust owns just to the northwest of Red Lobster on Northwest Expressway that really doesn't have much interaction with the lake whatsoever, and we really even haven't been able to do much with that. Draper, on the other hand, has a lot of land out of Draper, that and West Elm Creek, so there's hundreds and hundreds, there's thousands of acres out there. And we've tried to do some things out there in the past, and we've gone through some processes, and we've tried to get people. The problem with Draper is because of us, because we've bought the land for Draper, and we bought the land for West Elm Creek, there aren't any rooftops over there, so there isn't really demand to support development out there. And so we've gone forth, we've built, we have problems keeping just the boathouse afloat out there. We tried campgrounds out there. We've gone out with some RFPs in the past on Draper and had really very limited response to those.
But if, for example, something like a destination development, say an amusement park alongside Lake Draper, with the proximity of I-240 and not too far from I-35, I mean, you could certainly bring a lot of people out to something like that, and we wouldn't be automatically opposed to something like that. We would look at it.
No, we look at everything that comes down the line. A year and a half ago at Christmas time, we took a look at an oil well out at Lake Hefner that we thought was at least worth looking at. Mm-hmm. Quickly found out that maybe that wasn't the best thing to do, but we looked at the time. So no, we would take anything in there, evaluate it. Sometimes we'll meet with the recreational users. There's more of a process at Hefner, but we'd certainly pursue it and run through staff and ultimately bring it to the trust.
One final question. We wouldn't ever allow any part of, say, like Lake Draper to allow swimming to take place, would we? Just due to the risk of...
We might.
We might?
We haven't, but that's a policy issue of this board again.
We allow water skiing, so
Yeah.
You're already
Halfway there?
wet.
Yeah. That's what I've always thought. And it wouldn't surprise me if a fisherman every now and then got wet out there. Okay, thank you.
But the development at Draper has been something I've thought a lot about over the last 30 years, and I think it boils down to the lack of rooftops. There's just not any rooftops around there that would provide a constituency. I mean, there was a look at a couple of destination ideas under my predecessor's term, and even those would have required the investment of millions of dollars of the city's money to create the destination, which was kind of contrary to what we were hoping would happen. So we've kind of done the best out there with what we've got. We've segregated, if you will, the ATV people into one section, and that's been a good deal. It's kept them from tearing up the whole reservation and only let them tear it up a couple of sections. We've looked at, but with the lake being out of water for the last 3 years virtually, it's been very difficult to really kind of resuscitate the fishing and skiing and the marina and all that. But hopefully that'll change this spring when water starts coming back in. We start seeing people out there again.
So, and if I may, item 7B is a report about a fill material pilot program. We've had requests over time, and a year ago, we provided some information to the trust about potentially having individuals take sediment, really, from Lake Hefner was the lake that was empty at that particular time. The spring rains came, all the lakes refilled except Lake Draper, all were full until the Atoka pipeline went down. So Lake Draper's about 14 and a half feet low. I've identified a location that's in the report where staff might scoop up fill material, take it to a place just up the hill, allow people to come in and take that fill material. We want to pilot that to see how it goes, whether it works. What I like about the approach is that, frankly, that it keeps vehicles that don't have experience driving on the lake out of the lake. I think it can work. Well, this will not be a true apples to apples kind of cost calculation that comes out of this. I think we'll have a different approach. We want to gather some information about what the demand is for the fill material. And really we have at least a year. Should this work, we can come back. We have about a year to be able to remove deposits from the area. The location we selected is about over a mile from the intake structure for the plant. It's an area where we know that we have natural deposits. We are currently taking core samples to make certain that it's clean, so people know what they're getting, roughly, and excited about getting on with that.
That's one of those questions that comes up every time we talk about the cost of expansion of the water capacity. Somebody says, well, why don't you bridge the lakes, and so they'll hold more water instead of having to. And at that level, it makes a lot of sense. But when you drill down a little bit, it's not as easy said as it is done. But I'm glad we're looking at it, because at least when the next guy that calls me, I can tell him we're looking at it, as opposed to, that's a good idea, I'll think about it.
So that sediment, is it used for commercial purposes like for concrete?
It depends upon what's in it. So there's a lot of sand in Lake Draper naturally. And the sediment, though, if we're picking up sediment that comes in from Lake Atoka, that's a very silty, clayey kind of sand. So it will have different purposes depending upon what we find out it is.
A lot of construction just needs fill dirt, and that's generally the hope that you could use it for, just the fill that is necessary around some construction sites. Like building that big mound for the Indian Cultural Museum.
Yes.
Took a lot of dirt. Anyway.
And most of that came from the river.
Yes.
Exactly. And then finally, water use is essentially exactly the same as it was a year ago. But I think that that's a good thing. It indicates that we're getting some conservation. We've sold 2,875 meters this year, which is a 10% increase from last year. Last year was a little bit lower than the previous year, which was the record. So I think we're kind of at normal, be my conclusion on meter sales.
Well, it's good to see that Lake Canton's up.
Lake Canton is almost full, about 0.6 of a foot from full. Lake Draper has risen more than half a foot since we turned the pipeline back on. We're very excited about that. Lakes are generally full all over, with the exception of Draper.
And Draper was our own.
Yeah, Draper was
We did
because
that
the
to ourselves
pipeline was
again
down.
because
Exactly.
of the crossing of the South Canadian River. They had to be shut down.
Okay. Anything further? We're adjourned. Thank you. Oh, citizen, I don't see one citizen out there, but maybe there's one out there. Is there a citizen to be heard? Now we're adjourned.